Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are taking on, well, quite a source. It's excerpts from Alija Izetbegović, big multidisciplinary study, Islam between East and West. It's dense, it's sweeping, and it's really asking, where humanity might have taken a wrong turn.
It really is. And our mission today, essentially, is to give you a way into the author's analysis. He sees human existence as locked in this fundamental duality.
Right.
And he argues that modern history has basically polarized the world into two dominant opposing camps. We should be clear, though, he defines these camps very, very specifically.
Absolutely. He uses Christianization, well, not just as a religious term.
Not at all. It's his term for a specific cultural religious phenomenon focused, mainly on the spiritual side of life, culture, ethics, art.
And then the other extreme he calls Atheization, which he sees as this materialistic approach. And its practical result historically has been socialism.
That's the core setup he's working from.
Yeah.
He sees this whole modern conflict really boiling down to pretty stark contrast.
Which is
Conscience in mind that represents religion for him versus being and nature, which stands for science.
And we're going to explore the huge social, legal, and cultural fallout from these two competing ideologies that he thinks have shaped everything.
Exactly. The stakes, as he lays them out, are pretty high. We're talking about the basic premises that have defined mankind's destiny.
Okay, so let's start right at the foundation of his argument, this inherent dual reality of man. He says man is a unity of spirit and body. Simple enough, maybe. But what makes this unique, he claims, is that Islam is similarly a unity. It's religion and social order together. And he argues that's totally foreign to both Christianity's focus on the spirit and materialism's focus on just the material world.
And the philosophical depth he goes into there is fascinating. He's saying man experiences the world dualistically. We're literally living in two worlds at the same time, and they're different in nature, different in meaning.
How does he explain that split starting?
Well, he says life itself became dual the moment moral norms appeared. He even points to the Quran, that verse about man being asked, "Am I not your Lord?" and then being thrown out into the world. For him, that's the start of this permanent moral dimension, this tension.
Okay, so if morality and spirit are what define us, then the purely materialist view? Well, it must miss something fundamental about being human, in his view.
It has to, according to him. The materialist idea is that evolution, could only ever produce a really well-developed animal. It's focused only on needs and satisfying them, which he labels strictly as civilization.
Just needs.
Just needs. But man, he says, is primarily a spiritual factor. So man could only come about through an act of divine creation. His logic is pretty direct. No God, no man in this specific sense.
And therefore?
No culture, no real freedom. You just have perfected need, civilization, but no actual soul.
So if man is this fundamentally dual creature, part spirit, part animal, how does he map this onto the big picture, onto history? What are these two poles he sees shaping things?
Right. As you said, they're very specific definitions. On one side, you have the Christian phenomenon aiming for the spiritualization of history, focusing on ideas like creation, culture, art, morality.
And on the other side?
Atheization. And its practical expression, he argues, is socialism.
And we really need to stress this again. The author defines atheization as dealing not with man as a person, but with organizing the social animal.
Exactly.
He claims, and it's a strong claim, we're just reporting it, that this ideology logically ends up negating man, humanism, freedom, human rights, even while it embraces science and progress.
That context is crucial, yeah, because the materialist view underpinning this atheization says man is basically the perfect animal, the lone machine, the human machine.
So the difference between us and animals is just complexity.
Just complexity, yeah.
A difference of stage, he says, not quality. We're just products of our environment and our work.
But the religious view completely flips that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It says man is an animal, sure, but endowed with personality.
Precisely. What's his evidence that the real difference is spiritual, not just, bigger brains or opposable thumbs?
He argues the real difference shows up in having a religious, ethical, and aesthetic conscience. That's the key. He says we shouldn't date the appearance of man from when we walked upright or made tools.
But from when?
But from the first taboo, the first cult. The moment we start acting against our immediate material interest or instinct, that's when man appears.
So our defining feature is this non-utilitarian, maybe even self-sacrificial aspect. Is there a really concrete example he uses?
Oh, yeah, and it's a powerful one. The Potlatch custom. You find versions of this all over the world, even in pre-Islamic Arabia, he notes, as muqara.
What happened in a potlatch?
People would ritually destroy their own valuable goods. They'd burn blankets, smash canoes, things they worked hard for. And it was competitive.
Why on earth would they do that?
It wasn't about getting anything material. It was to prove their complete indifference to material wealth, to useful things. They were choosing a principle, status, honor, maybe spiritual power over the thing itself.
And animals just don't do that.
Never. This conscious, non-useful destruction of wealth. That's purely human, he argues. Proof of something beyond the material.
That rejection of pure material logic leads us perfectly into the next big distinction he uses. This fundamental split between culture and civilization. This is where those two big ideas, spirit and matter, play out in society.
Yes, exactly. Culture for him is the art of being man. It's about continually creating yourself.
In internally focus.
Right. Influenced by religion, carried by the individual personality. It seeks inner freedom, often by reducing needs. Think of like asceticism or deep meditation.
Okay, and civilization?
Civilization is the art of functioning, ruling, making things work better, more efficiently. It's about continually changing the world, driven by material exchange.
And its bearer isn't the individual.
No, its bearer is society. It seeks power over nature through science, technology.
And its logic is almost the opposite of culture's.
Completely. Civilization tends to intensify material exchange, create new needs, often, completely unnecessary ones.
Yeah.
He sums up its philosophy bluntly. Produce to gain, gain to squander.
Wow. What's sobering, though, is how he immediately questions whether civilization actually makes us happier or better off.
Mm-hmm.
He points out that even with massive material progress, like U.S. income being 5 times higher than in 1800 life, isn't necessarily 5 times richer or happier or more humane.
Yeah, and the stats he uses to back this up are pretty stark. He cites figures, for instance, showing dangerous crime in the U.S. increasing 14 times faster than population growth at one point.
14 times.
Or look at Sweden. Leads the world in material well-being, standard of living, right. Yet, he points out, it also held records for suicides, alcoholism, mental health issues. It's a deep paradox he's highlighting.
It really forces you to think about what progress actually means. If material wealth goes up, but psychological well-being or morality goes down, where's the problem?
For Izetbegović, the problem lies partly in prioritizing civilization over culture. You see this very clearly, he says, in education.
How so?
Civilization educates, but in a specific way. Technological, specialized, functional. It serves the system, the economy. Doesn't matter if it's a communist or capitalist system, the goal is function.
Whereas culture?
Culture enlightens. It's about meditation, wisdom, classical education. It starts and ends with man, the individual person.
So the critique is that modern education might be great at making efficient workers, but not necessarily free, whole people.
That's exactly his critique. He thinks it actively degrades culture, creating dependents, not free persons. And this filters right down into the kind of culture we consume.
Right. He makes a distinction with mass culture. He says it's not real culture.
Not authentic culture, no. It's just another aspect of civilization. Authentic culture speaks to the individual soul. Mass culture speaks to what he calls the man-mass. Someone who basically just has needs, not a soul.
And it leads to uniformity.
Spiritual uniformity, yeah. And it's based on manipulation. Think about mass media. You have few producers creating content for millions of passive consumers. That's totally different from, say, traditional folk culture like dances or rituals where everyone participated. It was based on consensus shared experience.
Okay, let's shift a bit to how this duality plays out in art and morality. He draws a really sharp line between art and science.
He does. Science deals with what already exists. It aims for exactness, for measurement. Art, he says, is creation. It aims for truthfulness, a different kind of truth.
The light art cast is created by art itself. That's a striking phrase.
It is. Art is a spiritual message for him. It testifies that life isn't just material, finite. He even argues that art itself depends on the idea that there's another world besides the purely natural one.
Which leads him to say
that art is naturally opposed to Darwinism.
That's a huge claim.
Yeah.
Art opposes evolution.
He argues it does, because art fundamentally isn't about utility or survival in the material sense. And that's why, he continues, atheism can never truly get art, because art is inherently, for him, a sacral message.
And he uses the example of atheist states.
Yeah, like the Soviet Union. He says, look, they produced amazing physicists, brilliant engineers that served civilization perfectly, but they lagged terribly in philosophy and genuine art. Art got suppressed or twisted into propaganda, like those production novels. It lost its soul.
That leads us right into ethics. If reason, as he suggests, only seeks efficiency, calculation, self-interest, How can morality survive in a purely materialist framework?
Well, he says flat out, morality cannot be based on reason alone. Morality belongs to that same inner world as art and religion. It's about intention, desire, conscience, things that are rooted in freedom, not just cause and effect.
And he sees evidence for this even in law.
Yeah, he finds it really telling that even our highly rational legal systems, when judging a crime, instinctively care more about the intention, the state of the soul, you could say, than just the outward consequences, the facts. The why matters more than the what.
So trying to build a legal system based purely on one principle, either just heavenly love or just earthly interest, is doomed to fail.
That's his point. Law is where this duality absolutely has to meet and find some kind of balance. Law has to be a bipolar unity, as he calls it.
Bipolar unity, meaning?
Meaning it needs both. It needs the Christian emphasis, as he terms it, on the value of the individual personality, on human rights. And it needs the recognition of this world's realities, its interests, its power dynamics, which he associates more with Judaism or materialism.
So a functioning just legal system has to somehow blend the spiritual and the material. It needs both conscience and consequence.
Exactly. And this leads him to conclude that law, in its ideal form, is actually Islamic by nature.
Why Islam?
Because, he argues, Islam as a philosophy is fundamentally structured to try and achieve that balance, to hold the heavenly principle of justice together with the earthly reality of power and interests. It aims to be the bridge.
Okay, let's unpack that synthesis more. Why does he present Islam as this middle way, as a method, a synthesis, sitting between the extremes he's defined between his version of Christianity and socialism?
It circles back to that core definition we started with. Islam as a unity of religion and social order.
Right.
This means the social structure itself is supposed to serve religious and ethical ideals. It tries to take the spiritual focus attributed to Christianity and the social organization seen in socialism, but crucially, it insists the material order must serve the spiritual aims, not the other way around.
Which would definitely explain why, as he points out, it tends to get attacked from both sides.
Precisely. Materialists look at Islam and just see the mysticism, the religion, they call it right-wing, backward. They only see the spirit half.
And the others.
Others look at it and only see the social laws, the political aspects. They call it a left-wing ideology, a political movement. They only see the body. Both miss the unity he's talking about.
And the ultimate philosophical concept he lands on within this synthesis is submission to God, the literal meaning of Islam.
Yes. Submission, in this context, is presented as, well, as accepting human destiny. It's a conscious choice to endure life as it is, with all its inherent difficulties, its suffering, its seeming senselessness, sometimes death.
But to endure it how?
With dignity.
How?
It's positioned as a way out that avoids the two big pitfalls. Either a kind of nihilistic revolt against existence itself, or the despair that leads to self-destruction. It offers a path that acknowledges the world's pain, but frames it within something larger, something meaningful.
We've certainly covered a lot of ground here, diving into the author's view of human dualism, these powerful polarizing forces he calls culture and civilization, and then this idea of Islam as a potential synthesis between them. It's a very comprehensive way of looking at the world.
It really is. And one thing that really stands out, thinking about it now, is his observation about civilization's relentless focus on society, the large impersonal collective.
As opposed to
community. He argues that by emphasizing society, technology, and the kind of atomization of individuals, civilization actually pushes us away from that spontaneous warmth, that personal connection you only really find in genuine community.
And you could argue we see people searching for that today.
Absolutely. He mentions, and you see it everywhere, this resurgence of interest in ethnicity, in finding smaller groups, a search for communitas even, or maybe especially in the most advanced civilized societies. People are looking for that connection civilization doesn't provide.
It really does feel like this historical experiment he describes, this tension between the two sides of human nature, is playing out right now, maybe more intensely than ever. So considering his argument that civilization can't really fix its own problems using its own logic, science can't just decide to become faith, what's the final thought for you, the listener, to take away?
Well, the author lays out these costs of progress: rising crime, mental health crises, environmental damage. If civilization's tools, its rational methods, can't solve these deep problems from within, then the counterargument, the balancing force, has to come from somewhere else. It has to come from culture, from spirit.
So the challenge is...
The challenge for all of us, maybe, is to figure out what principles, Principles rooted in human dignity and freedom in that inner world he talks about can actually serve as that necessary counterweight. What can stand against the purely technological, purely materialist push? And as the author might remind us, knowledge like this is most valuable when you actually understand it and